Welcome to the latest in our series of videos into Irish history. So today we're going to be examining the Cumann government, both its achievements and its failures from 1923 to 1932, and how they managed to consolidate Ireland after the Civil War and Irish democracy. Now, before we have a look at this, we need to look at things like what were the challenges facing the new government, what were the achievements of the Cumann government, and why did the Cumann government become so unpopular. Let's take a deep dive, shall we? So, in January 1923, the pro-treaty TDs of Sinn Féin changed their name to Cumann. Their leader was W.T. Cosgrave, and the anti-treaties TDs kept the name of Sinn Féin. In May 1923, Cumann won the general election. Sinn Féin refused to take their seats in the Dáil, so the Labour Party became the main opposition in the Dáil. Now, when Cumann won the Civil War, they set about the task of running the country, and they faced many challenges. The economy was in ruins after 5 years of fighting. There was still great bitterness on both sides as a result of the Civil War, and the biggest threat was that a large minority did not recognise the Free State, and therefore it had threatened its very existence. Now, what we'll look at is in terms of an exam question, and we're going to describe how Cumann succeeded in power. Well, the first thing that Cumann did, and their first major achievement, was the Constitution. The Constitution are the rules by which a country is governed. So the Constitution was based on the Anglo-Irish Treaty. It formed two houses of Parliament, Dáil Éireann and Shannon Éireann. Members of the Dáil had to swear an oath of allegiance to the King as the head of the Commonwealth, and it made the Governor-General the King's representative in the Irish Free State. Women were also given the same voting rights as men, which was seen as quite radical at the time. Now, as well as that, they had major success in law and order, and that was their main task after the Civil War, was to restore this law and order. So we had the Minister for Home Affairs, or in other words, the Minister for Justice, Kevin O'Higgins, setting up this new force called nGaedhael. nGaedhael literally means guardians of the peace. This well-trained force was widely accepted by the public as they were unarmed, and law and order returned as a result. Many IRA members still posed a threat to peace, and O'Higgins introduced the Public Safety Acts in 1923 and 1924, which enabled the government to imprison IRA members. These acts ended this threat, but the biggest threat to the state came from the army. The government planned to reduce the size of the army, so a group of army officers demanded that the government abandon these plans. They also condemned the government for failing to bring the Irish Free State close to a republic, and therefore the government considered this to be mutiny. Now, the officers involved were arrested, and from then on the army was never seen as a threat to the state again. This was a major achievement of the Cumann government. Thirdly, we look at the economy. Now, the government believed that agriculture was more important than industry, as most of Ireland's exports were agricultural products sent to Britain. To increase these food exports to Britain, the quality of eggs, meat and butter was improved. The ACC and the Agricultural Credit Corporation provided these loans to farmers to modernise their methods. However, very few farmers took out these loans. Low taxes minimised farmers' costs, and this meant that they were able to sell more in the British market. By 1930, you're looking at agricultural exports were at their highest for years. However, due to these low taxes, the government had very little money to help the poor in Irish society, so it was an uneven system. But one of their major successes in modernising Ireland was the Shannon Scheme. Now, from your study of history, you'll note that while the Industrial Revolution was happening in Britain and all over Europe, Ireland was left behind because it was still an agricultural society and it was still feeling the effects of the famine. So industry grew slowly as it was unable to compete with its British, rivals. One of the major problems facing industry was the lack of a cheap energy source. So as a result, the government built a hydroelectric power station on the Shannon. This was called the Shannon Scheme. It was built by Siemens, a German firm, and cost £5 million. It also shows that Ireland was again independent from Britain so soon after the war, by allowing themselves to do business with a German company. The Shannon Dam in Ireland Crusher provided cheap electricity. The ESB, Electric Ireland in modern terms, was set up to distribute the electricity around the country. So by 1930 there were now 13,000 more people employed in industry than in 1922, when Cumann came to power. And there's a picture of Ireland Crusher Dam today. What was an undoubted failure, though, was the Boundary Commission and indeed the relationship between Northern Ireland and the Irish Free State. In 1924, the Boundary Commission was set up to decide the border between the Irish Free State and Northern Ireland. In the Free State, most people expected that large areas of Northern Ireland, where Catholics had been a majority, would become a part of the Free State. Owen MacNeill represented the Free State, J.R. Fisher represented the Ulster Unionists, and the independent chairman was Judge Richard Feetham of South Africa. Now, it was reported in the morning newspaper, though, that the Free State would not acquire large areas of the north, and in fact that they would lose small parts of East Donegal, which had a Protestant majority. There was uproar in the Free State, and MacNeill resigned over this. Cosgrave hurried to London, and the agreement was reached, which left the border unchanged. This was a major blow for Cumann na nGaedhael. But the relationship with Britain is also important here. Now, the main aim of the Cumann na nGaedhael government was to increase the country's independence from Britain. It wanted the Free State to be recognised as an independent country by the rest of the world. So, as a result, the Free State joined the League of Nations, a sort of precursor to the United Nations, in 1923. It also appointed its own ambassadors. This upset Britain, as all the Commonwealth countries were represented by the British ambassador abroad. However, as the Free State was part of the British Commonwealth, with Dominion status, its independence was limited. With the help of the other Commonwealth members such as Canada, the government put pressure on Britain to increase the independence of the Dominions. The British gave in to their demands, and so, in 1931, the Statute of Westminster was passed. As a result, this meant the Dáil could pass any laws without interference from Britain. All Dominions could change laws that the British had made for them without the approval of Britain, and this meant that the Irish Free State could get rid of the treaty as it had been passed into law at Westminster. Cosgrave stated that they would not alter the treaty. However, De Valera himself would take advantage of this law when he came to power in 1932. Now, what you also see is the founding of Fianna Fáil at this time. Now, the anti-treaty Sinn Féin TDs would not swear an oath of loyalty to the king. This meant that they could not enter the Dáil. This was bad for democracy, quite obviously. So in 1926, Éamon De Valera proposed to the Sinn Féin party that they would enter the Dáil if the oath were removed. He was afraid that they would lose support in the elections if they did not take their seats in the Dáil. This proposal was defeated, and De Valera left Sinn Féin and set up Fianna Fáil. Among those who joined him were Sean Lemass. Now, when Kevin O'Higgins was murdered by the IRA, Cosgrave introduced the Electoral Amendment Act of 1927, which stated that all TDs must take the oath, or therefore give up their seats. After this act, De Valera took the oath and entered the Dáil. Now, to answer the question, why did Cumann na nGaedhael become so unpopular? Between 1927 and 1932, the Cumann na nGaedhael government became more unpopular due to the Depression, which was caused by the Wall Street crash and which led to high unemployment. The Wall Street crash was in October 1929 when the shares on the US Stock Exchange fell. The US economy collapsed, and this caused a worldwide economic depression. Also, cutting teachers' salaries and reducing the old age pensions was a big mistake, and it made Fianna Fáil even more popular. And, crucially, the refusal to use the Statute of Westminster to give Ireland more independence. So this comes into then why the 1932 general election was seen as important. Fianna Fáil came into power because they promised four main things. They wanted to break up the treaty. They wanted to put tariffs, which were taxes on imports, to encourage more Irish industry, therefore causing more jobs. They wanted to build houses for people living in slums, and they wanted to improve the pensions for the poor people. Fianna Fáil won the election, and with the support of the Labour Party, became the government. People wondered if Cosgrave would hand over power peacefully. He was a Democrat, and he quietly stepped aside. This showed that democracy was safe, which was one of the main achievements, and perhaps the greatest achievement, of the Cumann na nGaedhael government. That's all for today's video. We'll be back with more soon. Talk to you again. Goodbye.